Hello and welcome to the Friday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by the man some consider the greatest ball boy in Richmond kickers history. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Well, those people would be mistaken, my friend, because I was a water boy. Thank you very much.
Is that better or worse?
Well, I got to sit behind the bench and listen to the players' trash talk, so that was pretty cool.
So
yeah.
The same job as Forrest Gump.
Yeah, sure, I think. Is that what happened? Was he a water boy?
I think so, for the team.
I can't remember. I think he was the grass cutter, wasn't he?
Oh, okay.
See, you're all over the place today, Daryl. Tighten up.
All right, today's show, we're going to talk US men's national team. There have been some roster updates. There's been a Bruce Arena Q&A, sort of, on Facebook.
Yeah.
We're going to talk UEFA Champions League draw. And then later in the show, we're going to talk to Richmond Kickers head coach and director of soccer, Leigh Cowlishaw. It'll be interesting for Richmond Kickers fans, obviously, but I honestly think it'll also be interesting for just general soccer fans to find out what it takes to run a USL team and build a roster, all that kind of stuff.
Speaking of things that might be interesting to our Richmond fans, we have a live show coming up,
yes,
or live performance coming up, live event, whatever you want to go with there.
Thursday, March 23rd, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Penny Lane Pub. We'll be hosting a soccer trivia night. It's like a little bit TSS live show, a little bit trivia night. You can come in teams, prizes to be won. The event is sponsored by Guinness.
That it is.
The Facebook event the link will be in the show notes, right, Taylor?
Yes, sir.
So you can click on that.
Always promising show notes when he doesn't have to do the editing.
At least I asked.
Yeah.
Should we start with Fabian Johnson?
Sure.
So this happened after we finished recording Thursday's show. Fabian Johnson was playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach against Schalke in the Europa League. 16 minutes in, he's subbed out with a thigh strain. We watched it happen. We went back and found the footage. We saw it happen. Doesn't look good.
It does not. I'll say this. You know when you've really pulled a muscle, you can't go anymore. You can't run. You're hobbling. He looks like he's in discomfort. He continues to play for a couple more seconds before the ball goes out of bounds.
He gets back in defensive shape, right? And sort of does what he can.
He does, and you can tell. I would say this.
Very Maldini 94. Someone will get that reference.
I'm sure someone will. I would say based on his facial expression, that's what I'm going off of. I'm a facial expression reader now. I don't know if you knew that, Daryl. It's my second profession. It looks as though he's more so frustrated than in pain. And I think it's that sort of I know I can't keep going, but I want to keep playing, but I have to go off. And so I think that points to not a serious, complete tear or something like that, more a minor injury that probably will keep him out from U.S. national team duty would be my guess.
Well, I checked the Borussia Mönchengladbach _EN page to see what was going on. They have a report. It was about Christoph Kramer, who's also injured, and Fabian Johnson, they said, has a thigh muscle strain. Is that how they phrased it?
Yeah, or pulled thigh muscle. I think initially it was a thigh strain, and then later on to the other.
I also did some ortho research, and I think that was anywhere from 10 days to 6 weeks. That's not good because the game is less than a week away, the US national team game. He's definitely out of Borussia Mönchengladbach's weekend game, is what their report said. So let's assume that maybe Fabian Johnson is going to have to be removed from this US roster. Do we panic or do we not panic?
We don't need to panic, but I'm definitely disappointed, and I think it probably changes things just a little bit for Bruce Arena.
Because it seems like whatever the formation was going to be, Fabian Johnson was going to be sort of left mid or left wing, which, by the way, was where he was playing when this event happened. I'm disappointed because he's in such great form. Right? We talked about those two great goals from a couple of weeks ago in the Bundesliga, but it does mean you look at the roster. There's options, right? It now means you could see Darlington Nagbe start at left midfield with, say, Villafania behind him, and you could re-establish that old Portland Timbers connection.
I think I would be more concerned if Bruce Arena hadn't made it plainly clear that he was looking at him as a left midfielder. If he was our number one by far first choice left back, and then he went out, I'd be more concerned. But because he has been moved forward, you do have other options there, and it seems like maybe that will be where Darlington Nagbe plays now.
I mean, that's I guess. Bruce didn't say that, but that's what we're thinking.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's still definitely very disappointing from the standpoint of Fabian Johnson being in form, being a very exciting, potent attacking player, and a player who knows how to play against tough defenses. And it sounds like from Bruce Arena's expectations, that's what Honduras is going to be. It's going to be stacked. It's going to be defensive. You have got the pace of Fabian Johnson so that if they do counter, he can get back. So I think you're going to miss all those little elements.
I agree.
But again, I wouldn't say it's time to panic.
And I think the good thing is the US roster is deep. Talent-wise, it is deep. Maybe you could argue Fabian Johnson is a superior player to Darlington Nagbe. But, it's not not night and day. There's maybe a little gap between them. The US has options, so I think it's going to be okay. We can ride out an injury to Fabian Johnson.
I'd say it's probably a bigger gap than we would like to admit between Fabian Johnson and Darlington Nagbe, but I take your point. Yeah.
Okay. Also, other roster changes before we get into what Bruce Arena talked about. Brad Guzan is off the roster because he and his wife are expecting their second child around the time of the game. David Bingham has been called in to camp instead.
When we first discussed this, I haven't read the story. You told me it was his first kid. It's his second kid?
It's one of those two.
Okay, because that would change things for me a little bit. Now, having not had children myself, maybe I'm not one to speak here.
You saying that the second one doesn't count?
I mean, there's an entire Scrubs episode about how the second kid isn't as exciting.
Are you firstborn or secondborn?
I am secondborn.
Oh, okay. So
that's what I grew up with.
You're speaking for your people.
Yeah, exactly. Secondborns, yes.
So what this says to me is that Brad Guzan was not projected to start.
Yeah,
which makes sense given his lack of starts for Middlesbrough. Right?
Which, like, you have to imagine, like, this could be a Seinfeld episode in and of itself, because you have to imagine that Brad Guzan went to Bruce Arena and was like, Bruce, like, heavy, like, hat in hand, like, I'm really sorry, I can't make it, my wife's pregnant. And Bruce Arena's like, oh, it's fine, we weren't even considering you anyway. And he's like, oh, okay, that's great. Wait, what? Like,
which one are you again?
Yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean? Like, I like to think that there was that element of, like, nah, you're fine. And then Brad Guzan being like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome, I guess.
Like, don't worry, Marcus. Don't worry, Marcus Hanneman. It's fine. But so it does suggest that the battle for first team for starting goalkeeper is Tim Howard's fitness versus Nick Romando. Right?
Yes, I think so.
I think if Tim Howard stays, looks sharp in camp, he's going to be the starting keeper. Because David Bingham, I think, is there just because it's geographically convenient. Similar to bringing in Brian Rowe for camp in LA. Yeah. I think David Bingham's the easy choice because he's in San Jose already.
That's a decent shout. Yeah, Bruce Arena did say that he's comfortable playing any of the three when Guzan was still there. He said basically it's what happens in training will determine who starts. So I think you're right that it's probably between Nick Romando and Tim Howard's fitness.
All right. So the other US roster news is the Facebook Live Q&A Bruce Arena did not long after the roster was announced. It was maybe only 10 minutes. There's not loads of information there, but we should share what we learned from it with our listeners.
I have never felt more like these Facebook Live segments are contractually obligated than I did in this one video, because he knocks these questions out, and it's like, it's going to be important. Next question. Like he is getting through them.
Certainly that's an option, Tyler. That's his go-to response now to when he doesn't want to commit to anything. I mean, I understand, right? The coach, you don't want to commit to what formation you're playing. Yeah. Exactly. The one big headline... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the best example of that was the Kellen Acosta question. Yeah. Somebody asked him, could Kellen Acosta be a consideration at outside back? And he said, he is an option, but he's a central midfielder. We're going to play him as a number 6 or a number 8.
He essentially said if there's some sort of fullback apocalypse, he can fill in, but otherwise he's a 6 or an 8, which is good to hear, by the way.
But he keeps his options open and then says what he thinks.
Yeah, because you don't want to back yourself into a corner and then have no way out, right?
He will definitely never play centre midfield. Yeah. Or right back.
Always leave yourself a little escape route when you do need to play Acosta at fullback.
Wisdom.
So weirdly, the headline, I think MLSsoccer.com did this, which I'm not fully on board with, much as I love them, is that the headline was that they could play 3 in the back against Honduras. And essentially it was Bruce Arena saying, with the roster that we have, we could play 3 in the back, we could play 4 in the back, we could play 5 in the back. Everyone knows I prefer 4 in the back. Yes. So he's at least just saying, if we want to do that, we've got the option to do so. Yeah,
I mean, and then I think he was also, part and parcel of the question was about Jeff Cameron, where Jeff Cameron featured, and I think that, again, he kind of echoed he can play defensive midfield that's where he plays for Stoke. For the national team, he plays center back, right back. We don't want to change him around too much. We're going to look at him as a center back or a right back, and I think for the purposes of these games, that means right back.
He basically said Jeff Cameron would start at right back.
Yes.
Right? The only reason I could see him dabbling with the idea of a back 3 is that, according to Bruce Arena, Honduras also play a back 3, and there may be a situation where, for some reason, whatever that may be, it makes sense to just go like for like, and match up. So that's why maybe you've got to have that as a consideration of something that you might have to do. Yeah. But Bruce Arena did say, I've already said we're going to play 4 in the back. Yeah. I said I like 2 forwards.
He got a question about, can you play 2 forwards? And he's basically like, with the talent we have.
The question was about alignment.
And he said, it's certainly an option, basically implying that, yes, it's going to be 2 forwards.
Yep, but then he said, you do the math. There's going to be 4 in the back, probably 2 up front. Yeah. You do the math, how many midfielders there'll be.
Yeah.
Which I kind of enjoyed. Yeah. Any other big news come out from this Facebook Live?
I thought the Yedlin component was interesting. Somebody asked about DeAndre Yedlin and his fitness, and essentially we know he's ruled out due to injury, but it was interesting to hear that U.S. medical personnel had evaluated DeAndre Yedlin themselves.
Yes, they didn't trust those Newcastle doctors.
Well, it makes me wonder if that's what's going to happen with Fabian Johnson.
Maybe they couldn't understand the Newcastle doctors.
That could also be the case.
Why, man, this guy's no good.
I was like, okay, I think. Get another doctor in here. Yes, he said Yedlin is out for 5 weeks, but that's what U.S. medical personnel have informed him. It makes me wonder if maybe part of the delay with the Fabian Johnson situation is that they want to do the same thing.
Yes.
They want to have their doctors take a look at him because clubs, especially at this point in the season, are not entirely inclined to give up their players for international duty, especially ones who are nursing minor injuries. So I think in this situation, maybe they might want to do the exact same thing.
Also, there's a whole weekend of action to come. So maybe they'll delay naming a replacement for Fabian Johnson to see... Because it would just feel bad. It's a good, definite downward momentum if you name a replacement and then that player gets injured over the weekend. And you're just like, oh.
Yeah. And then the other minor points to come out of this, he said that Paul Areola, he expects to get consideration for the June qualifiers in the Gold Cup. Same thing for Gyasi Zardes.
Yep.
And then the only other maybe point to mention here was that he was asked if the absence of Kleston and Feilhaber means that Christian Pulisic will start in the middle.
Certainly that's an option.
And basically, you flipped it around. That's certainly an option. But otherwise, yeah, you're right. But then he went on to quickly add, but we also have, this paraphrasing. Yeah. We also have Bedoya, Leggett, Nagbe, and Clint Dempsey.
So it could be anyone.
So there's lots of different options.
Yeah. Oh, one question we didn't address, because obviously this didn't come up for Bruce Arena because it hadn't happened yet on the Facebook Live. If Fabian Johnson is off the roster, if he has to be removed, who replaces him? Does someone else come in? Does this open the door for Benny Feilhaber or Sacha Kljestan? Because it doesn't have to be like a left midfielder who comes in. Remember, I think it was... Kljestan's way back on the roster in September was an injury to John Brooks, for example.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like for like.
It does not. It also doesn't have to be anybody because that roster was 24, right? Because
you've
you've got the Jermaine Jones situation.
True.
So he might just keep it at 23. That could happen.
Yeah, and then you've got 22 for the first game, and then you add Jones afterwards.
Yeah.
Maybe a San Jose player, he just goes local again. Maybe Tommy Thompson. That's it. Tommy Thompson, US national team.
All right, I'm going to complete speculation out of nowhere. I'm going to say Greg Garza. That's going to be my guess for who comes in who comes in.
How many left backs you want?
Well, that's the thing is that only because if there was a case that he's not entirely sure that Villafaña can do the job or Beasley can do the job,
or Tim Ream,
that maybe he was thinking, or Tim Ream, that he was thinking, well, in worst case scenario, Fabian Johnson can drop back, and maybe he just wants a little more depth at left back just in case.
And maybe then DeMarcus Beasley's back to left wing, just like it was 2002 all over again.
What could go wrong? I think more likely it's maybe Feilhaber or Kljestan. But we'll see.
Or no one. Okay, we'll find out next week. Let's not waste our time.
I'm glad I gave a specific prediction and then listed 2 more names, and then you added or no one. So yeah, we're good. We got options.
We've got all our options covered.
I think so.
On the Total Soccer
or
Show.
Someone else. Nailed it. We're good.
Other thing I want to talk about is the UEFA Champions League. The draw was this morning. We came in the office and found out. Let's start with Christian Pulisic.
Sure.
His Borussia Dortmund will be playing, drumroll,
AS Monaco.
AS Monaco, defeaters of Manchester City. That is going to be one high-energy, exciting game. I'm looking forward to it.
That one being played on April 11th. So too is Juventus v Barcelona.
Yep, the first legs are April 11th. Then so the Juve Barca, that's a Champions League final of a couple of years back, right? That's an exciting game. Dani Alves returning to Barcelona. That will be interesting. Then the other games, the first leg, April 12th, Bayern Munich versus Real Madrid. For non-Pulisic fans or non-US fans, this is obviously the glamour tie. I think I just offended Juve and Barca fans, but Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, I think, is the tie that's going to get everyone's attention.
I think so too. And then the other game on that day would be Atletico Madrid versus Leicester City,
which is what the hipster pick, I guess, or the tactical pick.
I think
it's two similar-ish teams.
It's tough.
They do things slightly differently, but they have a lot of similarities about them.
I would say if I was going to give the edge to the hipster tactical pick, it's probably Dortmund Monaco, because of just the different approaches that Monaco utilized to knock out Manchester City, the fact that Dortmund are Dortmund and they're coached by Thomas Tuchel, there's many different options there. So I think that is basically, that's going to be a very exciting game. But really, I think this is probably not pointing to it being rigged. I love a conspiracy. This is not a conspiracy. But this is basically the best draw UEFA could have gotten in terms of getting people interested, getting people excited, getting people watching these games.
You could have had Bayern Dortmund and Barcelona Real, and then you've got the added derby element to it.
But you keep hope alive that could happen. Because that's really, that would be if you could have those 2 semifinals, or even that final of Dortmund Bayern or Real Barcelona. But I think they don't actually like that, because I think you get used to that. There was that time a couple seasons ago when you had 4 El Clasicos in a week.
Oh, another El Clasico. Sigh.
But I think it can take away a little bit, and it becomes a normative thing versus this spectator event.
Yeah.
And I do think that they'd rather keep them apart and get the kind of big, huge club versus big, huge club from two different countries because you keep everybody interested.
Fair enough. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so we'll be, I think, previewing those games as we get closer to them. Starting Monday, we'll be previewing USA v Honduras. Obviously, there's so much to think about with that. And we'll be preparing for Trivia Night once again, Thursday, March 23rd. On Saturday, March 25th, Taylor and I will be in the commentary booth doing the commentary for the Richmond Kickers versus the Harrisburg City Islanders. It is the start of the USL season. For the Richmond Kickers, it will be their 25th year in operation. To celebrate, there's an article in a local paper, Style Weekly. Richmond Kickers on the front cover. It's Luis Fernando on the front cover. Heading a ball, which actually you don't see him do that much during the season.
Not so much.
It's more of a foot skills.
Unless he's flicked it up to himself to, amuse the crowd. Yeah.
The headline is The Most Underrated Sports Team in Richmond by Jackie Krzyzewski. Really good story if anyone from Style Weekly is listening. To celebrate the 25th year of the Richmond Kickers, who better to talk to than Richmond Kickers head coach Leigh Cowlishaw. We pre-recorded an interview with Leigh earlier today. So we are joined in studio by Mr. Leigh Cowlishaw, head coach and director of soccer for the Richmond Kickers. Leigh, welcome back to TSS Towers.
Thank you, gents. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's looking a little better, right? We got the new
definitely
table.
Looking brighter, cleaner, and I can breathe in a real air right now. So yeah, not too bad a start.
For the record, it's always this clean. We didn't frantically clean in the last 30 minutes before you got
I'm
here.
glad.
I promise.
Wouldn't want you to get any trouble.
I think I cleaned for this office the way I clean when my parents come to my house. So you have that same level, Leigh. I hope you.
We're about the same age, right? Gotcha.
So we're really happy you're here. Thanks for coming. We got so much we want to ask you about. Not least of which, it's 25 years of the Richmond Kickers. This is the 25th season. We've got a cover story in Style Weekly, our local alt weekly. So it's a big deal. We want to ask you about the 2017 season, and we want to ask you a little bit about the past as well, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, because there's some stuff in that article about, you've been there since basically the beginning, right? The 90s? It's you and Rob Ucrop have been there since the beginning.
Yeah, I've been there for the first game of the season.
Wow, and there's stories in there about, accidentally, leaving a guy behind. There's stories about, people having to, almost miss the game because they were late for work. And we know there's such a difference between the professionalism of back then and the professionalism of now. So the first question is, who got left behind in North Carolina?
Who got left behind?
And how did that happen?
Well, here's what happened. The first time we actually realised that somebody had been left behind when we arrived at the hotel and the play was already there. It was actually Richard Butler who was working for Williamsburg Soccer Club at the time, and we were absolutely amazed. What are you doing here? We had no idea that he wasn't on the bus, and he remarkably got his own rental car because he was probably the only adult on the team at the time. I think he was probably 25, 26, a little bit older than most of the college guys. And he got his own rental car and was way more efficient. And the travel logistics, he was there in the hotel. I think he even checked into his room. So.
See, now I'm starting to think if it was
positives.
I'm starting to think if it was the only guy who could legally rent a car, that this was actually an intentional cost saving measure.
Could have been. Probably didn't want to hang out with a lot of college kids talking nonsense for 3 hours.
That could be. Yeah. So when you started, were you still at the University of Richmond, or had you already graduated?
I was. Yeah. In the early years, it was amateur, and so there's a lot of issues with the NSEA. Of course, as always, their college eligibility came up. I think the Kickers in their first year had a slogan called "We're Pro Soccer," which sounded pretty good, but then caused a lot of the universities a lot of stress because they weren't sure if their players were eligible. So I actually was not allowed to play in the first ever Kickers home game, I believe.
So you were just seated on the bench, and you with your center part.
And I've been there ever since, right? Seated on the bench, and ever since.
You'll be there next weekend, right? You'll be seated on the bench and not allowed to play unless you kind of sub yourself.
25 years, full circle.
So we also wanted to ask you about the marketing aspect of the Kickers, right? So to it, sitting here from a slight distance, even though we're there on game day for the commentary, it seems to me that a great job has been done lately of getting people through the doors. Crowds are going up. It seems like we're expecting a big crowd for the home opener. I've seen the video of all the TIFO. It's all happening. But I wanted to ask about the past of the marketing. I'd love to hear what you think have been over the 25 years, the best marketing moves and the worst marketing moves. Lessons learned.
Well, certainly the best ones of our kind of rebranding with the logo, and then the perception of real soccer, and the atmosphere and the fans, and we've been helped dramatically with a lot of quality teams in the US with Seattle and Portland. So you've got some great role models. So introduction of beer, alcohol was also very helpful. It started to target a new audience for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've always got the soccer families, which is huge for us in the youth club, but we wanted to definitely grow that target audience, and I think we have done. So
I'm interested in how you managed to walk the line between those two things, because it seemed like maybe it had to be one or the other, and yet you managed to draw in the guys who wanted to come and drink some craft beer and keep the families and not scare them away. So how did you manage to sort of balance that out?
Well, the beauty of City Stadium, as it's the 8,000 seat bowl gives you the luxury of putting the
distance is
the rowdy fans on one end of the stadium and our very important family fun type of customers on the other side.
Yeah.
But I think again, there's a few things that happen, but we're very much focused on making sure it's still family friendly for the most part. We don't want any disrespect. That's very important to us, and I think it's been a very nice balance so far. And as you can see, I think we're going to continue to grow, and our goal right now is to make sure that next 1 or 2 years we're hitting 5,000-6,000 a game. Last year was the first time we averaged over 4,000 a game, so it's a big benchmark for us.
Are there any? I noticed you dodged the mistakes question. Are there any, like, with 25 years of hindsight, are there any marketing moves maybe?
I wasn't a big fan of the original campaign where they just put a picture of a foot on this little piggy went to market. I'll show you one day. No, you haven't. No, which is good.
It's deliberately. Right.
He's burned all the copies and all the original film.
I'm not against it, but the blue kangaroo was interesting to me.
Yeah,
it was a little out there.
Was there a live kangaroo at some point? I feel like I remember that way back when that there was a tiny baby kangaroo.
We actually had in '95 a wallaby, not a kangaroo.
Oh, excuse me.
But he was live, and John Small, who used to sing at Potter's Pub back in the day, sang the national anthem live for the first game of the season with the wallaby on a leash, and unfortunately that did not go very well at all.
Really?
No, the wallaby did not handle that very well, and we got a lot of trouble for that. Mm-hmm. Clearly at the time I was just a player, so I wasn't in management, so we can get that disclaimer on the way, but it was not a good decision. But
so now we have Kickaroo. So
we have Kickaroo,
none of these same issues.
Not so live.
I wanted to ask you about the perception of Richmond, because I know there are the trialists coming in, you have open tryouts. How do people perceive the city and the club coming in for those open tryouts? Because you have the bigger, the bigger names in USL right now, which I guess would say maybe FC Cincinnati, for example, and then you've got all the MLS teams that you've already mentioned. So what is the perception of Richmond for people coming in who might not know about the history of the club? Yeah,
I think a lot of times players who don't know the history and don't know much about the city and the club, they're always gravitate towards the big clubs for the tryouts, and typically that's what I tell them is a mistake, because we do our trials very differently. I'm at every single minute of the tryouts for both weekends. I actually run the entire thing and organize the teams and the players. So I spend a lot of time there. And one, because we want to give anybody who actually wants to participate, they pay some decent money, and as they should, because we're out there for a long time. But also we find a lot of quality over the years. And so it's a big recruiting tool for us. It's very, very efficient use of our time as well. We signed 3 players from this year's tryout. Hugh Roberts has been signed, Braden Troyer, Uday Miura, Clyde Sims was signed. He went on to play for the national team. Yeah. Sasha Gore showed up at the tryout. So
wow, he's still here.
He still is. So we invite a lot of players in. So it's not everyone who pays. There's definitely a selection process to it. But it's a massive. I do believe Dal Grove even showed up one time.
For the record, it was for a Star Weekly story.
You never told me that.
But if I'd been offered a contract, I might have taken it. Assistant coach Jesse Myers told me at the end that CVSA, the local amateur league, needs my skills more, which is very tactful.
A very shrewd eye of talent was Jesse.
So with the open tryouts, I'm assuming you have a couple. I mean, as the article points out, you're looking for, say, a left back. But is it the situation where if you see just a person who seems very talented, who seems like they could fit in, then they get included, or do you kind of stick with the specific positions you're looking for?
No, I think there's more of a chance for players playing a specific position we're looking for. But again, if there's a player we absolutely know is going to be somebody with a bright future in the league, then we're going to find a way to sign them, because then it becomes a long-term decision for us.
But is it more about like just kind of the, I guess, intangibles essentially, more so than like, oh, he completed a bunch of good passes, but like the way they look on the ball?
Yeah, it's absolutely opinion. I mean, we're going to watch them play in small-sided, full-side games. You're not going to see a lot of functional stuff. You're going to have, the good thing about the trials is you get to talk to them and you get to learn about their backgrounds, and that's an important part for the psychological profile of trying to get a feel if they're going to fit the club and if you feel they're going to be the type of player you want in that position, or even, you know, as a squad player or even as a starter. So a lot of valuable time when you're able to speak to the players.
And how much does coachability factor into that? Because I have to imagine, even if a player is incredibly talented and good technically, if they can't execute what you're asking them to do in the tryout, then that becomes an issue.
You'll get to see a lot of that when you're talking to the players. But again, it's only 3 days, so we've typically done well with the tryouts when we've signed players. They've typically done well, but now and then you're going to make a mistake, and hopefully it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was so few mistakes that you struggled to mention them before. So I think we're good.
I'm still waiting for them. No, but we have missed some good players. I'll be honest with that. Dakers came to the tryouts and we loved him, but it was a case where he was in a position that we probably didn't need at the time. We just had Ownby coming in, and he ended up going to Louisville and was fantastic. And now he's signed with Cincinnati. So you're not always going to get everybody, and you're going to miss players. But
yeah, I remember the trial I was at. Matt Kanji was there, who went on to play for Colorado, I believe.
Yeah. He was. I think he was like 18 then.
Yeah, he was still.
So we loved him, and we were desperate to sign him. And at the time, I think his parents weren't too keen on. I think 18-year-old leaving home and playing. And like you say, we could see right away that he was a top-class talent.
So looking at this season for a second, so you have had those trials, you have had new players come in. What are you looking at in terms of like the overall makeup of this team? How do you think it compares to, say, the team of last season?
I think we're stronger. 1 through 20. And that's a big statement for me, because I thought it was very good last year. But so far, when you include the potential loanees from DC United as well, you could argue the strongest class that we've had involved with the club, and that can change rapidly, as we've seen in the past. That initially there's 5 players, and then it changes, and then new players come in, or the players we've had loaned break into the first team. So a lot of volatility with that. But just from the original group that's been selected along with our guys, I think it's a very strong squad overall.
I want to ask. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that. A big thing for us was getting Alhaji Kamara, because we needed a centre forward. Anthony Grant's been fantastic, but we need a little bit of help in the number 9 position. And he's a player who's done extremely well in pre-season. Somebody has a record of scoring goals, can lead the line, and which has been a pleasant surprise for us. Has been very, very focused on being a real team player, and that's been fantastic for us.
We also got to look at Oliver Minatel we saw the one preseason game against William and Mary. We'll be there for the VCU game this weekend, and I saw maybe 20 minutes of Oliver Minatel, and it made me excited for the season. Yeah,
I watched a lot of tape of Oliver. He'd been played wide a lot for other teams, and I feel that he's going to be much more beneficial for us playing central, either as a 10 or a 9, and so far he showed real quality glimpses of those moments. He's also a very educated soccer player. He's a mini coach on the field, very wise for his age, and that's going to be a big benefit also. So
in terms of like the differences between last season and this season, one big name who I think Daryl and I grew to love as the season went on was Hugh Roberts, who's since departed. And I'm more so curious, how difficult is it to retain the services of some of these guys, especially with the kind of instability in this offseason with USL, NASL, what was going on there? Does it make it difficult to hold on to some players when there are potential other avenues out there?
Yeah, more than ever. Competition is driving that, especially with the bigger clubs coming into USL and North American Soccer League. You've got extremely wealthy owners all looking to stake a claim for Major League Soccer. Many of those markets are looking for expansion to MLS. And so they have to put on a successful winning brand. And with that comes much larger payrolls than the Richmond Kickers can compete with. Yeah. So, it's always challenging. The one thing we have is a very strong family. There's a lot of tradition there. Players love being in the city. They love being a part of the club. And the huge advantage we have now is that it's a great place to play. So a lot of the MLS 2 teams play in front of, hundreds of people. Let's be honest.
Even like Red Bulls too, they have Red Bull Arena, but with only a few hundred people.
So when we're 5,000 or 6,000 a game, it's a great place to play and apply your trade. And a lot of players appreciate that.
And speaking of it being a great place to play, it sounds like in the next 40 years or so, it's going to be an even better place to play. Because that was the other big news in the offseason, I would say, at least from my perspective, was the long-term lease that you guys were able to secure and the planning that went into that. I'm sure it was real fun.
It's been about 4 years in the making, a lot of work behind the scenes, speaking to the neighborhoods, the community, the city, obviously. It just allows us to control our own destiny now. And it's not going to be overnight transformation, but you're going to see slight changes in the next couple of years, no question. And we know we have a home now, and we know that we have a stadium that can produce a fantastic atmosphere, is an ideal geographic location for the entire Central Virginia area. So, and we have a great field.
No, in the planning, I didn't see the air-conditioned commentary booth and the green room that goes with it. And I'm just wondering,
it was phase 2, right? Phase 2 is the commentary room.
Well, I mean more so the green room. Like, I just wanted to talk about some things that I would like to see put in there. No,
it's true though. It comes after the air-conditioned locker rooms, right? Right behind it.
He says with a wink for the listeners at home. But I do want to ask about like the kind of process of changing the stadium. Like, what are the things that you're most excited to see in that plan, and what are your expectations in terms of the timeline?
Before Leigh answers, I just want to, for people who are not in Richmond, because we've got listeners all around the country, that to picture City Stadium, it's an old stadium, right? It's from 29 or from the 30s?
Yeah, 1920s.
It's kind of a bowl.
1930s.
And as I understand it, the plan isn't to like demolish it and rebuild a whole new stadium. It's to make like these incremental, smart changes, so you're spending money sensibly. So I'm really excited to see exactly what that means.
Well, I don't think the plans have been finalised to that extent. Certainly, the goal would be to keep the bowl because, one, it holds 8,000, which is the ideal capacity for a Division II professional club. At some point, the other side, the bleachers, will have to come down.
We'll evacuate before you do that. Because that's where our commentary booth is.
So that will definitely change long term. And then you've got the top area behind the bowl is a fantastic place to walk, the food trucks. So you can see that evolving over time. But at that point, it's still very early. I don't want to speak too much about the specifics because I don't think those plans have been finalized at this point.
Okay, I see.
I want to ask you about the Division 2 sanctioning as well. So obviously it's Co-Division 2, USL, NASL, provisional sanctioning for 2017. I'm wondering, I remember seeing, I can't remember who posted it, something on Facebook from the Kickers that we've got the inspection today, like the US Soccer people were coming to take a look. Yeah,
as part of the process, the Federation actually visited all of the USL clubs and just to check.
And was that is that like a restaurant, like health and safety inspection where you have to like
it was mostly to do with the stadium, making sure the field is compliant, you have enough seating capacity, visit to the offices because part of the process is having positions of employment for several numerous positions. Just to make sure that's in play, making sure the coach has an A license. Was a piece of it. So it wasn't too extensive, but they had to do their due diligence. And it was a fun 3 hours.
And then are you involved beyond that? Because I know that there's involvement from the clubs on the sort of the board of USL, right? So were you involved in any negotiations after that? Or was it just the Kickers sit back and wait for USL to
the Kickers weren't involved in any negotiations. That's from from USL and Jake and Alex.
Right, okay. But you obviously thumbs up for Division 2, right?
Absolutely. No, we deserve it. And that's part of the process for the last 4 or 5 years. What USL has done a fantastic job with bringing in new ownership that were already D2 compliant. And that was the long-term goal that people didn't realise until now.
And does it have a material effect for the team, for the club?
I think it has a huge commercial effect for us because you've seen the TV deal.
Yes.
We're now one level below Major League Soccer. I think it has a lot of opportunity long term for the league, for national deals, and sponsorships for our club have never been at a higher level. Not only on the ticket sales, on the commercial revenue. Premier League's been visiting, so it's very, very positive over the last 2 years for us.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask about, so you mentioned earlier that, kind of you all tend to think of yourselves as a family, that's a big selling point for the Kickers. I'm wondering if that can be at a certain point, almost a double-edged sword, though, because so many, from growing up, I remember, Rob Ukrop was the name of, Richmond when it came to soccer. As he gets older, as he starts to kind of, have his best days past him when it comes to his playing days, which is a weird thing to say because I always think of Rob Ukrop as eternally scoring goals. Does that get difficult? I know you weren't, maybe not so much for you, but say a player like Matthew Delicott. At a certain point, is it difficult to have a fan favorite and have to kind of phase them out of that starting 11? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's part of the business that at some point players are no longer going to be required. Mm-hmm. How we're able to keep it a family, as you can see, for the vast majority of our technical staff, they're all former kickers, professional players. So we will always continue to find positions for our former players who are motivated, coaches who want to continue to produce for the Kickers. And that's a big part of the family as well. But yes, it comes a point where a player can no longer do the job required and he's reached that age or skill level where it's just not happening. Then you've got to phase it out either immediately or over time. And that really depends on the playing contract.
And I imagine that also is reflective of the, I guess, kind of knowledge base of the fans. That I imagine it goes from, at least in the early 90s, when I think last time you were here, you were mentioning that people used to cheer when the ball would be kicked high or kicked long. And I imagine that's also sort of fans can see that, oh, he's not as producing as much as this player was, whereas in the past it was Rob Ukrop came to my school, so he should be playing all the time.
There's
no matter
definitely
what.
A lot more opinions out there, which is great. And as you are now the expert critics for the Kickers, we get to listen to you two quite a bit.
Oh boy!
Oh, I didn't think about that. So when you rewatched the game,
I just put on mute.
For real? Yeah, that's fair.
I can't say I blame you.
But I also get other feeds, so sometimes I might listen.
I'd never considered that.
Yeah, I've heard that the referees sometimes listen, so that's an important thing to note as well. Yes.
Oh, I'd love to look ahead to the opening game, right? Yeah. Harrisburg City Islanders coming to City Stadium. I really want to ask, I don't want you to reveal it, obviously, but do you have a Richmond Kicker starting 11 in your head and a formation, everything ready to go for that game? And have you researched Harrisburg City Islanders? Are you, at this point, just over a week away, is it all tactical plans, or are we still easing towards it?
And can you do all of our pre-match research for us? If you could tell us what Harrisburg is going to do and maybe they're starting 11 as well, that'd be great.
Yeah.
The first one, yes, I do have a very, very strong idea of the formation. That's happened over the last couple of weeks. We've worked extensively, tactically, on 2 or 3 different formations and variations out of those formations. So it's been the hardest but most productive preseason we've had because of the new blood in the team. Harrisburg, I've not even looked at yet. That will happen after Sunday. We have one final preseason game against VCU. I want to make sure we're fine-tuned, and then we'll focus time on Harrisburg. The tough part about the first game of the season with all the teams is you're just not quite sure. You can have a look at some preseason matches. You might be able to get some quality film of the games, but overall you're not really going to get a true feel for what that team is going to produce. We're at home. I feel we're very, very confident right now. I feel that we are very organised and we definitely have the talent. But again, there's a couple of pieces out there with the DC United loans and some of our players are carrying a couple of niggling injuries. Things can change quickly.
Well, I was going to ask about the loan situation for a second. I don't really have much background in this. I was not loaned from an MLS club, so I can't say. Is the reaction to that, like, are people happy to be getting that experience, to be able to, you know, be getting regular minutes with the kickers? Or is it seen as sort of like we're being sent down, we're not good enough for MLS right yet? Like, are players generally pretty pleased with it, or is it kind of a mixed bag?
I think it's just dependent on the personality. I've certainly found the vast majority of players are happy to get meaningful playing time, especially playing at home with the kickers' crowds. So I would say usually DC United loan players are absolutely wanting to be there. They're professional soccer players. They want to compete, and we give them the chance to compete, and they want to improve, and that can happen as well. As with my guys, we treat them all as one, so everyone's competing for a spot. And we've had a lot of quality success with it. And Connor Shanosky, who's our player now, you know, he's experienced that on the other side with DC. Earlier in his career, he was one of our loanees. So, yeah, I think it's definitely difficult to manage from a tactical standpoint and also from a psychological standpoint. But there's no question it makes us a stronger squad overall for the season. So pleased to have the guys on board. And
I imagine pleased to have, sorry, Daryl and I are trading off, but not really, because I'm just going to ask another one. I also imagine you're pretty pleased. You're pretty pleased to have maybe a goalkeeper set for the whole season. I know the injury to Ryan Taylor made things a little bit chaotic at times last season for you all. So what are your expectations there, and can you tell us a little bit about who's going to be in goal?
Well, we ended up having, I believe, 7 goalkeepers start for the team last year, which was way too much. So as you've seen, I've gone and secured 2 full-time goalkeepers with the kickers, Marcel and Alex. So that will give us a strong nucleus right off the bat. DC United are always looking to find time for their goalkeepers, and in the past we've got good relationships with other MLS teams if an emergency happens, which it did several times last year. So I think the goalkeeper position is still up for grabs. I still think there's a lot of competition to come, but certainly come 10 days. Someone's going to be in there.
At least you've got it sorted, as opposed to say, like Minnesota United.
The great thing for us, we got a lot of quality options.
Yeah. Final guy I want to ask about is one of the DC loanees, Chris Durkin. So we've seen this guy because we've been watching the US Under-17 games.
Right.
Really impressive. Really hard to believe he's as young as he is, because he seems to me like plays like a grown man. I was really interested in sort of how that's going to work for the kickers, because I know he's going to have like U17 qualifying and maybe World Cup kind of stuff. So how much could people expect to see Durkin play for the kickers this season?
Well, again, in the short term, he's one of the kickers' loan players.
Yeah.
So he will be available, I believe, for the first 4 or 5 games of the season.
Okay.
And I know right now he's with the U17s. They've got a couple of games warming up for the qualifying. Of course, he'll be gone for hopefully an extended period for World Cup qualifying, and it's a success. And just depending on how well he does at DC United as well, plays into it. But certainly in the short term, we expect him to be competing for a starting spot for our team.
So is that good that he could come in and possibly play?
I think all the DC United players are at that level, and we'd expect a lot of quality from them because of that fact.
All right. Well, Leigh, thank you very much for joining us in our cleaner studio.
We'll go back to messing it up.
I think last time you were sitting on the ottoman.
I think I was on the floor last time.
we got a proper seat for you this time.
Much better experience. I really appreciate it. I won't be calling my agent.
That's good.
Thanks, guys.
All right, so best of luck. March 25th, home opener, kickers against Harrisburg City Islanders. We will, of course, be there, and then I guess you won't be hearing us because you'll be watching on mute when you watch the video.
Yeah.
Maybe on Sunday.
Thanks, Leigh.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks again to Leigh Cowlishaw for joining us in the studio. Always appreciate his time, of course.
Always a delight. I've known that man since I was 11.
Is that right?
Yep.
Oh, from your water days.
Well, it started out with my attending Richmond Kickers camp days and progressed from there.
So he taught you everything you know about dribbling?
Yes. Everything. It was only him. No other coaches. Just that one week of summer camp. That was what did it. Yep.
So if the Richmond Kickers were maybe interested in signing some promising youngsters, one place they could look is the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network.
Well done. Nice transition.
We have. I've done it before.
Yep.
We have 4 young players we've been keeping an eye on. Actually, some of them may be a tough get.
I was going to say, I think other people have been keeping an eye on. We've been keeping a passive eye on.
Okay. We are going to read out the scouting reports today from Cat Prickett, Ryan Marzak, Michael Fisk, and Richie Garcia. Would you like to start, Taylor, with something I found out last night on Twitter, and it's good news?
Would I ever? First report comes from Kat Prickett scouting Tyler Turner, not Tyler Adams. Tyler Turner, the 21-year-old American defender for Los Dos, LA Galaxy 2.
He is now.
The Galaxy 2 signed Turner, formerly of Orlando City SC. In doing so, Los Dos have brought him from the wilds of Florida through the scary uncertainty of being a young, promising, yet unsigned soccer player right to Carson, California, in Kat's backyard.
Yeah, because we were worried about Tyler Turner, right? With this exciting, promising right back who played for the US Under-20s. Yep. The option on his contract was not taken up at the end of 2016. We didn't know if he was going to get a new contract.
And Kat writes, quote, I'd like to think that Galaxy General Manager Pete Vanias has been listening in to the Total Soccer Show for updates on young players and that might have prompted him to make a move, end quote. It sounds like Kat isn't the biggest Galaxy fan, or one at all, but she's excited to watch Turner and Los Dos this season.
Yeah, didn't she do a hashtag never LA, hashtag but maybe Los Dos?
Yeah, I think that was about it, yep.
All right, second scouting report comes from Ryan Marzak. Ryan is scouting Pione Sisto, the 22-year-old Danish winger for Celta Vigo. Ryan says Sisto started both legs of the Europa League round of 16 tie with FC Krasnodar. Celta won the first leg 2-1 and the second 2-0, meaning they advanced to play Genk in the quarter-finals. Pione created some decent chances and was good in possession, but wasn't able to get his name on the score sheet, much to Ryan's chagrin. You wrote that. You love the word chagrin, don't you?
Chagrin, yeah. I don't know what a chagrin is, but yeah, I know what a chagrin is.
It's a type of fish.
I know what chagrin is, yeah. Is it? No. Michael Fisk reports scouting Andreas Christensen, the 20-year-old Danish center-back for Gladbach on loan from Chelsea. Andreas has been in stellar goal-scoring form for Gladbach recently, scoring a header against Hamburg in the Bundesliga on Sunday, and then making the most of a flicked-on header against Schalke in the Europa League on Thursday. Sadly, that match...
was the game Fabian Johnson got injured in.
It was indeed. Sadly, that match ended 3-3 on aggregate, with Schalke advancing on 2 away goals. The Hamburg goal was particularly impressive. I did see this one. He does a really good job to get around his defender, kind of evade the grasps that the defenders do in those dying moments, and put a good header in to like the side netting low, kept that header down. Well done, Andreas, and well done, Michael, for the scouting report.
Final scouting report comes from Richie Garcia, who is doing a great job scouting Emerson Hyndman, the 20-year-old American midfielder at Rangers, on loan from Bournemouth, I believe. I nearly said Fulham, Bournemouth. Richie says, Emerson has had 2 very solid performances in the last 2 Gers matches to hopefully impress new manager Pedro Cachina. He put in a solid 27 in their 6-0 Scottish Cup win over Hamilton Academicals. He then got his first taste of the storied rivalry with Celtic when he played his first Old Firm derby at Celtic Park. Hyndman didn't have quite the impact that Adu or Rayner did when they first played in the derby, but he did contribute to Rangers' equaliser. He took a shot that Celtic keeper Craig Gordon did well to save. Clint Hill was able to bury the rebound. That was in the last 5 minutes of the game as well.
That sounds all right.
I saw this goal. Well done to Emerson Hyndman.
Yep.
All right.
2 yeps in one report on Emerson Hyndman. Not bad.
So 6 total?
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody
total,
in the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network. If you'd like to join, it's at totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. Before we say goodbye, one final reminder. Penny Lane, this Thursday in Richmond, March 23rd, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m, soccer trivia night with Total Soccer Show. We want to make it a success because we want to make it keep happening. The event is sponsored by Guinness, so thank you to Guinness.
And some or all of it, I think, will be put out as a segment in the podcast the next day or the next week, which means that if you're there, you might get to be on the pod.
Oh, yeah. All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah?
Right back at you.
Listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you again to our guest, Leigh Cowlishaw. We'll be back on Monday to begin the previewing of the US national team versus Honduras.